Okay, this is the first in the series looking at the world as it once was and often is in various fantasy settings. So we're looking at hospitality, and this is a very important part of a game that is often underplayed because of our over-experience of the modern world. Remember those two tribes that I described in the introduction with completely different cultural values, religious values, who despised each other and suddenly found that they were neighbours? This is what you would expect to encounter if you leave your own tribe and travel for any length of distance. Unless you bring, you will always be seen wherever you go as foreign, unclean, incomprehensible, evil. Your values will be seen as evil in the way they differ with the locals, and they will differ with the locals. You'll probably be seen as an idiot as well, because you won't know all the local politics, you won't know the local language, you won't know the local important stuff. And so that should be the experience of a foreigner who travels, because think about it, they have no allies with them, unless they bring an army with them, which is kind of a different sort of situation. You'll have no allies, no one will know if anything happens to you, no one will complain if anything happens to you. You're completely at the mercy of these foreigners whose cultural values are different from yours, and that you will undoubtedly, inadvertently end up insulting. And it's even worse than that. You don't just require that these foreigners be indifferent to you, they have to actively help you. They have to either give you food or sell you food or let you forage or hunt on their lands, unless you're just lucky enough to be transporting huge amounts of food with you. And they have to actively protect you. If there are bandits around, or if there's any local who just doesn't like the look of you or wants your stuff, they have to, at their personal expense, extend their rule of justice to encompass you, bring you inside the group of people that is protected. So what sort of happened historically? Well, the impression I got is that basically there's a reverse problem. There are some cities that want to trade and want to attract, at least briefly, attract foreigners towards them, and no one is going to come if it's so dangerous to travel out. So they start instituting cultural norms. Well, they start instituting, basically what they want to say is, come here, we won't kill you, we'll protect you, promise. Except a promise like that is utterly worthless, because you can just go back on it whenever you feel like it. These are only foreigners, nobody cares. And the people who do care will never hear about it. Or you can always say, we're really sorry, it was a bandit that killed them, we couldn't do anything about it. So instead of doing that, they created the value, the tradition, the cultural norm of hospitality. A stranger, unclean by definition, who comes is greeted, is welcomed, is protected, explicitly protected when they are in your territory. Maybe for 3 days is one of the traditional durations, but anyway, for a period, they are explicitly protected. So in a, say, D&D party of adventurous things, the parties do not go swanning in to the local area and go to a local tavern or stuff like that. They must be, at least initially, intensely respectful of the local culture, looking around, seeing what the locals are doing, trying not to put a foot wrong, trying to find someone there, someone influential, to extend a greeting, to bring them in, breathe them the hospitality, and then, for at least a while, they're safe. Then they can interact a bit more, take a bit more risk, learn what's going on, and have adventures. But they're not sufficient in themselves. If the town of 200, 300, 10,000 people doesn't like you, and they almost certainly won't like you, and want you dead, you will be dead of starvation, if for no other reason. So yeah, so that's the sort of interaction of trying respectfully to find someone who will vouch for you or will extend the hospitality for you, or figuring out the local culture ahead of time so you can fit into that protected slot should be a valuable experience just as much as adventuring. Similarly, well, Vampire has it built into its own system, the fifth tradition of hospitality, and that is very important even for modern vampires, because they don't have the advantages of, say, modern humans who have their allies in constant contact with each other. They're just a phone call away, and the media and your embassy will look into things if you get too mistreated. And we have legal systems which are kind of reasonably good at not gratuitously persecuting foreigners who visit, that kind of stuff. But vampires, even modern vampires, don't have that protection network. They don't have large amounts of allies who will rush to take revenge if they are killed. They don't have legal systems that are honourable and have a reputation to maintain in the cities they visit. So they are entirely dependent on the tradition of hospitality. And similarly, any court that wants to attract visitors for trade or for any other reasons, they have to honour the tradition of hospitality and proclaim it. So you shouldn't just do a perfunctory introduction to a prince. You arrive, blah, 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 say the prince, yes, we promise that. That is the most important part of the arrival in the city. This is where you move from someone who could be killed on sight by any vampire of the city and no one would care, to at least nominally protected and able to find out and fit yourself in with the city. So, and lots of other role-playing game, post-apocalyptic, these traditions should see some revival for the same sort of reasons. What other role-playing games? Any role-playing games where there's no strong centralized state and no sort of instant communication is a very fertile ground for this kind of thing. This kind of, as I say, cultural norm of hospitality, because it's necessary, because people will not travel to you if you don't have it. And if you want to trade, you do need to have it. So as I say, post-apocalyptic, maybe certain space scenarios where things take too long to get anywhere. Again, so you get this thing where they will have some tradition, some form of hospitality, some way of extending it, and they will expect the visitors to be respectful, humble themselves. We come visiting, we ask humbly to grant us the rights, blah, blah, blah. That's the typical interaction that you will find in this area. And after you started to get to know people, get to know the area, then maybe relations can go to a different level. Maybe the adventurers can be a bit more arrogant, shall we say. But until then, they're entirely dependent on these cultural norms. Cultural norms are basically the only things that are keeping them safe, the cultural norm of hospitality. Anyway, so I encourage you to play around with that if you feel like it. And next time we'll having a look at honour and why it was so prevalent in these kind of worlds, why it was so useful, and why you pretty much don't find it much anymore. Thanks for listening.